So what's good, TMG fam? It's your boy Ellen, and I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute. So the next case we're gonna get into. This one goes out to all my people out in the dating world that's trying their hard to date in our current climate. So this one goes out to y'all. It sounds like I'm dedicating a song to a loved one, but this goes out to y'all. This is the case of the Tinder killer. The Tinder killer. All right. So I know y'all know I'm not a fan of them, but that's just out of my own, I guess you could say, ignorance of me not understanding these apps and being sort of a little bit more old fashioned. I'm not too much a fan of the apps because of the people who catfish, the people who lie, the people who connive, the people who, deceive people on these apps. That's the reason. That's my sole reason of not being a fan, man. You can put yourself in some very compromising positions with these apps. And I know your intentions are good, but the people on there, I ain't gonna say a lot. Some of the people on there's intentions are not. So my only concern is for people's safety with these apps. So if y'all telling me that these apps are safe, I have no choice but to believe you because I'm not on them. All right, but we're gonna get into this case and see what happened with the Tinder killer. So if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Join the fam. I appreciate everybody, but we gotta acknowledge the haters, man. So real quick, moment of silence for the haters. That's enough. Now run the likes up. Make sure y'all hit that like button. Let's go.
What is up, Ewu crew? Today we are going to be covering a story so chilling, it will make you think twice about who you believe you can trust. It is the case of Jesse Shane Kempson. If you enjoy true crime, mysteries, and true stories, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Jesse was born and raised in the Wellington region of New Zealand with his parents, though they eventually divorced when he was only 9 years old. Following his parents' separation, Jesse spent the majority of his childhood with his father and his paternal grandfather, as his mother had moved overseas when his father remarried. In his early adulthood, Jesse attended Aotea College and even played softball at a regional level for a variety of teams. When he wasn't attending classes or playing softball, Jesse spent his time bartending when he could. In fact, when Jesse lived in Sydney, Australia between 2013 and 2016, he made a living bartending and working in construction and general labor. To his family, he appeared to be a hard-working young man who had a taste for the fun things in life. But no one seemed to know exactly how Jesse defined fun. To everyone else in his life, Jesse was widely regarded as an enigma of sorts. Acquaintances who were familiar with Jesse said that he often claimed to have received his bachelor's degree in international law from Aotea College, and that he had originally come from money. In fact, it is said that Jesse used to claim to have come from a family of millionaires who owned restaurant chains in Sydney, and that he was in touch with a variety of vague contacts that worked in New Zealand immigration. After his stay in Sydney, Jesse ended up moving back to New Zealand and to Green Lane and Mount Eden with a few other young adults who...
I asked him though, but you work at a bar. You come from a wealthy family. You have all these contacts, but you're a bartender. And nothing against bartenders, nothing. But when you come out and boaster and brag about that, naturally people tend to sit back and say, but okay, something here is not equal. It ain't lining up here, buddy. Only to people who are arrogant like that, I would have that.
Zealand and to
response.
Green Lane and Mount Eden with a few other young adults who were on the cusp of starting their respective professional careers. Jesse's old roommates claimed that Jesse often engaged in disturbing, untrustworthy behavior, and was known to be a bit of a pathological liar. In his early 20s, like many other adults his age, Jesse became rather obsessed with using dating apps. And perhaps one could refer to Jesse's addiction to dating apps as quite a deadly obsession. In December of 2018, Jesse found himself scrolling through Tinder in search of a date, as he frequently did. While doing so, Jesse came across the profile of a young woman named Grace Millane. Grace was originally from Wickford, Essex, and had recently graduated from the University of Lincoln. After obtaining her bachelor's degree in advertising and marketing, Grace decided to take a gap year before applying to grad schools. And in doing so, she also decided to spend the majority of her gap year traveling and going on a backpacking tour to make the most of the experience. After backpacking through South America for 6 weeks, Grace decided to choose a new route for the next 2 weeks of her trip. On November 20th, 2018, Grace entered New Zealand, and by the 30th of the month, she made her way to Auckland. As Grace's birthday was just days away, she intended to spend her time in Auckland's central business district to celebrate on her own. Or perhaps not entirely on her own. On December 1st, the very eve before Grace's birthday, she coincidentally came across Jesse Kempson's profile on Tinder, and, finding him attractive, swiped right. The two ended up matching and proceeded to have a conversation that quickly turned into the pair making plans.
So is that how, I'm not familiar with Tinder, so that is how it is? You just scroll through like a lineup in a police station, you just scroll through a lineup, and then you pick some person, and I guess what is swipe right, and then that person has to accept your swipe, or how does it go? How does it go? Like, I'm tempted to go on there and mess with it, but now before I let it go, I ain't just gonna have my phone on some Tinder app and then Queen roll up on me like, "What you doing?" I'm like, I was trying to it was research. It was research. You think she gonna believe me? No. So we're gonna do it together. But definitely, I want to know what's the process in it of how you go about it, and do both of you have to agree to continue conversating, or how does it go? Y'all let me know.
And proceeded to have a conversation that quickly turned into the pair making plans to meet up for a date. That very same evening, Jesse and Grace met in person for the date as they had discussed. As seen on the CCTV footage from the Sky City building, the two embraced in a hug while exchanging pleasantries and introductions around 5:45 p.m. Then, the two proceed to head up the escalator to the second floor of the building, where they would come to make their first stop of the evening, a restaurant called Andy's Burgers and Bar. Once Jesse and Grace entered the bar, they can be seen on CCTV footage grabbing a couple of menus before ultimately picking a table just out of the camera's view to enjoy a few drinks and appetizers. And just over an hour later, the two are caught on camera again as they leave Andy's to head off to their next destination. They proceeded to leave the Sky City building and head out onto Federal Street, where they ultimately ended up deciding to enter another establishment called the Mexican Cafe. While at the Mexican Cafe, Grace and Jesse spent about an hour drinking around 3 jugs total of margaritas and sangria. Jesse can be seen covering the pair's tab before they ultimately move on to their third and final drink spot for the evening, the Bluestone Room. Around 8:30 p.m., just moments after they entered the establishment, Jesse and Grace are caught on camera kissing passionately at least 3 different times. It appeared to those around them as though their date was going well, and that the two of them seemed incapable of keeping their hands off of each other. And then, things took a turn for the worse. At around 9:20, Grace can be seen excusing herself from the pub table to presumably use the restroom. As she did so, she ended up leaving her purse behind with Jesse, hoping that he would look after it respectfully while she was gone.
Now, I know a lot of women, bro. That's normally a no-no. Especially upon the first time meeting somebody. You just don't normally just leave your purse hanging around. I've never seen that out of women. The women I grew up around, the women I've known, that's normally a no-no. So you can already tell she's gotten way too comfortable. I mean, the kissing should have, but they had mad drinks. So mad drinks, you probably make some bad decisions after that.
Except that is not at all what happened. CCTV footage captures the moment that Jesse actually reaches across the table to grab Grace's purse and search through it. Finding whatever he had been in search for, Jesse slips what we assume to be some cash into his pocket from Grace's handbag before she returns to the table. And, as concerning as that was, it did not end there. Once the two exit the Bluestone room, they can be seen walking down the street until they...
You know what I bet? He was getting his money back for everything he done spent tonight. That he knew what his intentions was. So he knew he really didn't want to be paying and everything. So he was trying to get his money back. And robber as well, too. Well, that's considered robbery, too. But he was trying to get that money back. He knew what his intentions was.
Ultimately end up at the City Life Hotel on Queen Street around 9:40 p.m. Jesse and Grace proceeded to book a room for themselves to spend the night together, and were even captured getting into the City Life Hotel elevator from the lobby just moments later. Once the two arrived on the 3rd floor of the hotel building, they exited the elevator and presumably headed off to the room they reserved. And unfortunately, that CCTV footage from mere hours before her birthday was the last time anyone ever saw Grace Millane alive. The first indication that something had gone horribly wrong was when Grace failed to respond to her parents' text messages and calls, in which they intended to wish her a happy birthday. Not only was that kind of behavior regarded as rude in her household, it was also completely out of Grace's character. As the entirety of December 2nd, 2018 came and went, and Grace's parents still had not heard from her, they knew that something must have happened. Wanting to ensure that they did not overreact, they waited 3 total days before contacting Auckland police and reporting Grace missing.
Dang.
While Grace's parents tried tirelessly to get into contact with their daughter, Jesse rented a red Toyota Corolla hatchback from a rental car company in central Auckland. By the time Grace was officially reported as a missing person, a public appeal was issued, and all of Auckland was on high alert in search for the foreign backpacker who seemed to have vanished into thin air. But what really happened?
So nobody cleaned the room? Or did he take her body out the room? That's the thing. Because I'm pretty sure if they only got the room for one night, housekeeping would have had to come up there. And if he left her body there, they'd have had to find it. So the fact that that wasn't alerted, meaning he must have got rid of the body.
And to Grace Millane after she stepped off of the elevator at the Sky City Hotel. According to Jesse, he and Grace had engaged in rough intercourse that ultimately went too far, resulting in Grace being choked to death at Jesse's hands. But, according to Jesse's own phone records, something else happened entirely. Evidence was found that proved Jesse had taken intimate photographs of Grace's lifeless body after having killed her. Then, instead of reacting in a panic as he would have if her death had been an accident as he claimed, Jesse proceeded to search for disturbing content online, while Grace's body lay at his feet. Then, Jesse looked up the Waitakere Ranges, a rural location just a 45-minute drive away from the hotel. As we mentioned, Jesse rented a car while Grace's parents tried to determine if their daughter was in danger. But before he did so, he was seen at a local store purchasing a large suitcase with wheels. Then Jesse made
Told
his...
y'all. Knew it. He got rid of the body. He had to get rid of the body, bro. Housekeeping would have picked up on it quickly, so we knew that. But then this fool looks up stuff on his phone. That's why I tell you, man, these killers is dumb as they dumb. They dumb. People still think that they can't go through your records. But yet you always see subpoena after subpoena of someone's phone.
his way back to the hotel to drop off the suitcase before heading back out to purchase various cleaning products. After successfully renting a car and returning back to the hotel room to drop off the rest of his purchases, Jesse is captured on CCTV later the very same afternoon, meeting up with another woman at a bar. The other woman, authorities concluded, was another date that Jesse had arranged on Tinder. All while Grace's lifeless body remained on the floor of Jesse's hotel room. While on the date, the woman who has remained unnamed claimed that Jesse made a comment that, quote, "Police dogs cannot smell dead bodies if they are buried more than 4 feet in the ground." Later that very evening, Jesse was once again spotted on the camera in the hotel's elevator, borrowing a dolly to move 2 suitcases out of the hotel, one of which contained Grace's naked body that Jesse had folded into a fetal position until it fit. Jesse then proceeded to exit the elevator on the first floor and roll the dolly out of the hotel's glass doors. He is seen loading the suitcases into the red Toyota that he had rented earlier in the day. After doing so, he returned the dollies to the hotel and exits once more before driving away from the scene of the crime with Grace's body in tow. Jesse ended up burying the suitcase with Grace's body in a shallow grave in a forest area near Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Ranges, the same location he had been looking into just moments after taking her life. And by the time anyone had realized that Grace was missing, Jesse was already returning to his normal routine. On December 7th, Grace's father, David, was able to fly into Auckland to demand information and answers from local police. At that moment, police had also managed to identify a male companion that they believed to be with Grace in her last moments. 26-year-old Jesse Shane Kempson. Later the very next day, Jesse was taken in for questioning regarding Grace Millane's disappearance. Throughout the questioning, it was clear that Jesse could not directly answer questions regarding the suitcase that he was seen carrying on CCTV. After the interrogation with Jesse, police publicly announced that they were treating the disappearance as a murder investigation, and Jesse was formally charged with Grace's murder. At the time, due to New Zealand law, his name was not publicly released. After further investigation, police were able to locate Grace's remains in the Waitakere Ranges shortly after 4 p.m. on December 9th, 2018, a little over a week after her death. Jesse Shane Kempson was on trial 3 separate times. During the first trial, Jesse was convicted of murdering Grace Millane in December of 2018. He was then sentenced to 17 years in prison. At his second trial, Jesse was found guilty of, quote, sexual, physical, and financial abuse of a former girlfriend who had stepped forward after seeing Jesse's name in the news for the murder of Grace Millane. Jesse's ex-girlfriend claimed that Jesse had tried to kill her in January of 2017, stating that he had chased her around the house with a knife and choked her into submission before forcing himself onto her. At the end of this trial, Jesse was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Finally, at his third trial, he was found guilty of assaulting a woman. This woman, like Grace, had actually met Jesse on Tinder and stepped forward after hearing of Grace's murder. At the
Y'all heard that, right? I'm gonna back it up though. Y'all heard that, right? 7.5 years? Murder, right? Murder was the case, like Snoop Dogg said. Murder was the case that they gave him, right? Okay. Just making sure that's what I thought I heard, but I backed it up. Let's see.
knife and choked her into submission before forcing himself onto her. At the end of this trial, Jesse was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Finally, at his third trial, he was found guilty of assaulting a woman. This woman, like Grace, had actually met Jesse on Tinder and stepped forward after hearing of Grace's murder. At the conclusion of this trial, Jesse was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. To add to the tragedy of this case, Grace Millane's father, David, recently succumbed to cancer 2 years after his beloved daughter died. Jesse Shane Kempson's story is a chilling one, and one that will hopefully remind you to be careful who you spend your time with, as monsters lurk around every corner.
Again, y'all, Tinder. You gotta be careful, man. Gotta be careful. Not telling you not to go out there and date, live your life, and have fun. But we can all see these outcomes, and fam, she was just trying to have a good time for her birthday with somebody she thought was a good person. Boy, was she wrong. Boy, was she wrong. Dude had no intentions. He was going through a purse when she went through the bathroom. He was a straight D-bag. Straight up. Like, for what he did to her, in 7 years, tell me it's not something wrong with our judicial system, bro. Like, something's wrong here. Why did he only, you know what, I'm gonna leave that alone. That's above me. But man, y'all break down the app for me. I need to know a little bit better. And y'all get at me in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of this story. Till the next reaction, I'm out.